Welcome back to another episode of Sharpen Your Skills, brought to you by my friends at Redo and Parker. Today, we're tackling the most complex topic in our present e-commerce environment, marketing measurement. And the first way that we're going to improve this with one swipe of my pen is we are going to eliminate the idea that marketing gets measured differently than the rest of the business. There's only one way that we measure business efforts, and that's with financial measurement. The rule is everything we do inside of a company is for the sake of producing shareholder value, which is a financial measure. So marketers, the first thing that we're going to learn before we get into any detail is that we are going to measure our work in the financial impact that we make on the business. All right, how do we do that? Do it through what I call the hierarchy of metrics. It's really important to understand is that there is no one metric that is going to tell us everything that we need to know about making a business financially healthy. We have to embrace the complexity of this problem. So when we think about the different metrics that we're going to use in assessing the performance of our marketing efforts, we're going to think about it in four important layers that move from certainty and objectivity down to directionally helpful. And at the top of our pyramid, the hierarchy of metrics, is contribution margin. And it's specifically contribution dollars, not percentages. This is what I like to call the rule of law inside an e-commerce business. Every month, we are going to create an expectation of contribution margin that is the only thing that we are going to drive to succeed against in every single month. It will be the scoreboard by which we determine our wins and losses.
Okay, quick time out for an ad read. When I went to find a partner for this series, I knew I had to find something that would help you guys at the overlap in finance and marketing. And that's where I went to Parker. And not only that, I wanted something that was going to help you all in Q4. So check this out. The Parker Rolling 45 credit card, I think, is one of the best offers in the world. With a traditional credit card, whether you spend on the 1st, the 4th, the 24th, or Black Friday, right, which we know is November 29th this year, all of that money is due on the 1st of the month. That takes your precious cash flow and it subjects it to these massive drops where you have to go off and pay all your spend on the 1st of the month, regardless of when you spent that money. But this doesn't make sense in a period where we're spending 10x the amount of money on a Friday right before the start of a month. So what Parker Rolling 45 does is kind of genius. It treats every day like its own cohort of spend, including Black Friday. And then each day is subject to its own 45-day payment term. So every day has a different due date, which means that your spend on BFCM, okay, isn't going to be due until January. So rather than having to spend all of your Black Friday money that you just earned on paying off your credit card 1 or 2 days later, you're going to be able to move that out 45 days. So you get 45-day terms on every day of spend. This smooths out your cash flow and allows it to grow steadily. And Parker will do this analysis where they'll show you what your cash balance on your bank account will look like with a traditional credit card and their rolling 45. If you're looking for ways to extend your payment terms, create more cash in your bank account, especially in Q4, and I know the other thing that happens is oftentimes we're making a big PO purchase ahead of Chinese New Year in February. This is a great way to smooth out your cash flow, take advantage of rolling 45 terms, getparker.com.
And the calculation for that measure is net sales. So that's after discounts, that's after returns, that's minus taxes, minus all variable expenses. This is my cost of goods, my shipping, my fulfillment, my payment processor fees, minus my ad dollars. That's going to be our definition. I want you to build a plan to achieve this number. I want you to track everything we look at here today. We're going to have a daily expectation of, but I want to always and forever see in context the expectation, my contribution dollar. I want this on the biggest screen in your office. I want it on the first tab of everyone's browser. Every day, everybody knows where we're at relative to our contribution dollar goal. What this is going to do as a forcing function for all members of the organization is create alignment around both the revenue that we're tracking and the costs that are accrued in the generation of that revenue. It will force marketers to consider variable expenses, to consider the efficacy of their ad dollars only through the lens of the dollars generated in the bank account, and move the organization towards a financial level of sophistication that will improve everyone's job. But you may be going, Taylor, this is one metric. No, this metric alone is insufficient to determine both the present and future health of the organization.
It is the goal every month, but it is by itself insufficient for us to follow and track. So at the top, we have a financial metric. The next layer, we have what I would refer to as business metrics. Okay. These are revenue, ad spend, MER, which is just simply revenue divided by ad spend. Some people may refer to this as ACOS, average cost of sale, and it's expressed with the revenue as the denominator and the ad spend as the numerator as a percentage. And then average order value. These four metrics actually play a critical role in determining the progress of the business as well. MER, or average cost of sale, is ultimately going to give you a preview into the P&L, which will be measured and looked at as a percentage of revenue. And then ultimately, there's a universal reality that despite contribution dollars being the most critical metric for determining a proxy to profitability, is that top line growth matters. For the sake of generating shareholder value, top line growth will always matter. Now, it's really important. As we move down the hierarchy, these metrics are subordinate to the ones above. What do I mean by that? That means that we would sacrifice any of these individual metrics in the name of contribution margin. So in other words, we will sacrifice top line growth for the sake of meeting our contribution dollar goal. But ideally, we don't have to. We want to have a visibility into both. The third layer is what I refer to as customer metrics. Alongside the revenue that we generate in a snapshot of a month, we need to also have a view into the rate at which we're creating future value for our business. The efficiency of new customer acquisition is always going to be a leading indicator to both the potential growth that exists in our business, as well as the future returning customer revenue our business will generate. The metrics that we're going to care about here are AMER, or new customer acquisition marketing efficiency rating, new customer revenue over ad spend. Just define that as NC rev over ad spend. New customer CAC. Some people might refer to this as weighted CAC. This is just ad spend divided by new customer orders. And it's a setup for the volume of new customers, the raw count volume of new customers. Okay? And then finally, first order value, and I'm going to use this as a financial term, against CAC. This is the net value or the marginal value of the sale divided by the CAC. In other words, are you first order profitable? How much profit are we generating on first order? Every one of these metrics give us an insight into the efficiency at which we're generating contribution dollars.
And it's really important to understand that this gives us a visibility into a really important growth lever, which is that if we are willing to reduce the amount of first order profit that we take in acquiring customers, in other words, if we're willing to spend more or increase CAC, we can increase volume. And there's always some relationship between how much profit we're trying to protect in first order and how much volume or top line revenue growth we can create. So I often use this layer, I've heard this, I use this reference a lot, called fuel profit. That's what the relationship represents. And it helps me to see how much gas is potentially in my tank to go drive top line revenue growth, as well as a volume of new customers and ultimately contribution dollars. And finding the right relationship between first order profitability and volume is often the velocity constraint that determines the growth of the business. Now, you'll notice we are here talking about marketing measurement, and you haven't heard me talk about any sort of ad measure, not CTR, not CPC, not ROAS, not in-platform measurement. Well, there is a place for it, and that's at the very bottom of the hierarchy of measurement. Before we have a consideration for anything that's happening in any platform or in any BI tool or in any marketing attribution solution, we are going to have clear visibility into all of these metrics. The goal with this is to kill proxies. Down here, these are what I call proxy metrics. In other words, they don't relate directly to any of the dollars in your bank account. They are substitutes. They are directional. This entire layer is intended to be directional. Okay? It's really important to know that once we cross this line, we've moved out of objective reality into estimation, into modeling, no matter what solution we use. And that's why it is subordinate to everything above it. But let's discuss the proxy metrics that we care about. These are what I would refer to as channel metrics. This is how we're assessing the individual performance of our media dollars in Meta or Google or Snapchat or Pinterest or TikTok or any other place. We're going to care about spend. We're going to care about platform reported ROAS. And we're going to care about an important metric that I call iROAS or incremental ROAS. And something I refer to as incremental profitable return on ad spend. IP ROAS, incremental profitable ROAS. At the end of the day, we want to use our dollars to generate incremental profit.
All right, I'm interrupting this episode to bring you another way to save money in Q4. The reality is that there are two silent killers of profitability that exist before we even get to your CAC, OPEX, or cost of delivery. And it has to do with your discount rate and return rate. We know going into Q4, we're going to have to discount. It's an expectation of the customer. But how do we reduce this second one, returns? Well, looking at an example here, gross sales of $1 million, discounts of $200,000, returns on $150,000. That's 17% of your money that's going to discounts. And we've seen it be as high as 30% for some apparel brands. We know in Q4 that can inflate too because you have gifting purchases and other complications related to buying. Well, my friends at Redo have an awesome solution because a lot of times brands have to choose between, do I offer free returns or do I make them pay? Well, if I make them pay, I've seen data that says that 75% of customers say they will not buy, no buy without free returns. So what do? You either get killed in your profitability or you eat it and make the customer dissatisfied. Well, Redo offers you a solution. They enable an automated pay a small coverage fee at checkout. They auto apply it for every customer, and then that enables free returns and exchanges covered by Redo. In addition to that, they also offer you order tracking, support, as well as the ability to handle warranties and processes. So you can combine 7 different vendors from your software into one. You get free returns. And we've seen on average brands save $40,000 by switching to Redo. So combine a bunch of your software stack into one, enable free returns for your customers at a benefit to them, at a small coverage fee that's auto-applied at checkout, and you're going to be saving an immense amount of money. And tell them Taylor sent you right now, and you get $100 to Bad Birdie just for watching a demo. I'm here for your margin innovation, another Q4 solution to a big problem, returns. GetRedo.com.
The gold standard for how we should handle channel level evaluation which is where most of the tactical decision for marketers comes down to, is using incrementality. The problem with anything that is not a geo holdout incrementality experiment designed to establish the causal relationship between your ad dollars and outcomes is that any inference at the ROAS or even the MTA, multi-touch attribution or attribution level, is a corollary relationship between your ad dollars and some outcome. But it is not a causal relationship. Incrementality, and in particular, geo holdout, is the gold standard for determining causal impact of your advertising. Now, I want to talk about a really important reason why I think that the relationship between ROAS in platform reported, I'll make this the denotation, in platform ROAS and the incremental ROAS that you establish, the relationship between those things is really important. And what you should seek to do is to run a geo holdout study to build the relative relationship between these two measures, okay? When you run a geo holdout study, the best way you could do that would be to isolate your ad spend on a specific platform like Meta and measure the impact on your Shopify dollars, on your actual business outcomes, not the platform reported result. And then to establish what the platform reported as return versus what the incremental return on your actual business was. So let's imagine the platform reported a 2-to-1. You generated $200 for $100 in ad spend. But you find out that the incremental ROAS was only $160 on your $100 in ad spend. That means that your iROAS is 80% of your platform reported number. Okay? This relative measure, some people will call them weighted factoring, allows you to establish a platform target, which is critical because ultimately the platform can only see the data that it receives. And because we are a big component of introducing cost controls into our platform measures, at the end of the day, we need a platform target at the optimization setting that we choose. So the way that we do that is if our goal is actually to generate, let's say, a 1.5-to-1, we'll just divide that by the factor to get to the platform target, and we'll manage to the platform ROAS based on the incremental ROAS in our relative relationship, the weighted factoring that we did by establishing a geo holdouts test. You can do this with partners like Measured or House or Stella or others. As a substitute, if you can only do it with a conversion lift study through Meta or a Geo2X study through Google and only have access to the platform result, okay, that will at least give you a factor on the incremental impact versus the platform result using platform reported revenue as a measure. That's a good substitute if possible. But let's say you don't even have access to using a geo holdout study at all. I'm going to give you right now a tool to help you think about incrementality from a first principle basis, as well as some benchmarks that you can use to establish some incremental factors based on where you're spending your budget. When I think about incrementality, there we go, mentality. It's not even a word, it's going to turn up red in your phone every time you type it. How incremental an advertising effort is depends on the relationship of this matrix. Let's imagine that on the y-axis, we have the customer journey. So at the very bottom here, you would have an existing customer, someone who's already bought from you before, with an item already in their cart. Okay? That is like as far down the funnel as you could possibly get. And then all the way up here at the top, we have a net new customer who has never heard of you. Okay. That's our y-axis. Then on the x-axis, we have the optimization setting. Okay. When you build in any ad account, whether it's Google or Meta or Snapchat or TikTok, you have to choose on which attribution model you want the platform to optimize for a result. Those choices sound like 7-day click, 1-day view, which is the default Meta optimization setting, or 30-day click, 1-day engaged view, 1-day view, which is the Google default optimization setting. And what I'll tell you is that the tighter the obligation of action, in other words, the higher the standard for a behavioral action related to a short window of measurement, the higher the incremental impact. So let's imagine you have 1-day click as the most conservative optimization setting, meaning the holding to the highest standard. Someone has to both click on an ad and purchase within 24 hours. And then on the other side, you have what I call like the old Criteo rule, or I think even Pinterest is pushing this a lot these days. It's like a 30-day click, 30-day view, a very wide optimization setting that would allow for even the smallest level of interaction, simply a view, to be counted for a very long period of time. Now, a simple rule is that the closer you are to this quadrant, which up here would be a dot where you are obligating your ads to being measured on a 1-day click basis for a brand net new customer who had never heard of you, this is going to be highly incremental. Platforms will often underreport the impact associated with this type of purchase, such that your relative incremental ROAS will be higher than 100%, which means that the actual impact is higher than what the platform reports. Now, alternatively, all the way over here, this existing customer being measured on a 30-day click, 30-day view is going to have a very low incremental impact. The platform will often over-report the value, and so your iROAS factoring is going to be something like 10 or 20%. So you can imagine this is like display remarketing is usually very low incremental value. And then you'll have things like branded search, which branded search would exist somewhere in this spectrum where it's like to all customers, but it's like a really wide attribution model because it's 31-1 in Google. So you have brand search, okay? And so your incrementality factor here might be something like 30% is the benchmark that we see in most cases. Now, on Meta, our preferred optimization setting is about a 7-day click. And if you're excluding all your existing customers, what you get is an incrementality factor, usually somewhere right in here, where it's about 120% is the benchmark for 7-day click Meta, where if a platform's reporting a 1, we see the incremental ROAS actually be higher than what the platform reports. Now, if you're running a 7-day click, 1-day view, 7-day click, 1-day view, okay, which is the default, you see sort of the opposite, which is that you get like an 80% incremental factor. Now, here's a really important thing. This doesn't necessarily mean that any one of these is a better or worse use of your dollars. It just means that the target that you have to set in platform has to account for the fact that the platform will over-report the impact relative to the actual causal relationship to moving up this spectrum.
Also, as part of this episode, comment measurement below to receive a reference sheet for incrementality benchmarks across different marketing channels.
Now back to the drawing. So these metrics, iROAS and the relationship with incrementality, allows you to build a relationship to the AMER target that produces contribution dollars such that you can spend confidently against these results to produce this result, which grows this at a rate that increases contribution margin. And that's the magic formula for financial measure. If you can get an ad iROAS that relates to a profitable AMER such that the revenue that you generate increases CM, that is it. That's the formula. Get an advertising ROAS that achieves your AMER goal, that drives profitable top-line revenue and increases contribution margin. If you can accomplish this, you have built a marketing measurement system that will improve the finances of your business. But it has to come down to a ruthless obligation that these metrics, the problem with them, even if you establish an accurate IROS through an incrementality geo-holdout study, is that that was a snapshot in time about the past. These metrics, the reality of them change all the time because the underlying context in which these tests are run change all the time. So it may be true that you are running all these ads and you're actually finding that my AMER is lower. It seems that the relationship between my IROS and AMER is broken. This rules all. Tighten the expectation of spend. Reduce to achieve this metric. Never allow the achievement of a metric further down in the pyramid to overwrite the outcome at a higher level. At the end of the day, contribution dollars represent dollars that show up in your bank account. They flow through the business, they cover OPEX, they show up in the P&L in the form of profit. And as a marketer, if you can figure out how to use these actions to drive this outcome, you will become a powerful and valuable resource inside of your organization.